Over the years, leglocks have evolved from dirty tactics to revolutionary, cutting-edge technology to common occurrence in everyday practice. Where are you on that spectrum? Regardless of that answer, there is no denying legs any longer. Understanding and utilizing leg entanglements and leg locks are essential to being a well-rounded grappler today. Experts will claim that there are all different positions and situations you need to learn and memorize in order to become proficient and eventually an expert, with layers and layers of details in order to effectively control and submit someone through leg attacks. Recently, I have gone through hundreds of matches, as well as referenced some experts in the space, to come up with some key components that exist in all leg entanglements and the submission more popularly known as the heel hook. My goal is to show you that there are only a few so-called invariants that you need to worry about, and hopefully this video will cut down the time you would otherwise need to understand and utilize leg locks substantially. Today, I'm here to unlock the heel hook. Welcome to my first of many videos in a series where I look at submissions and grappling and break them down to their key details or invariants. If you're new to this kind of language, I design my practice to be live training and utilize the constraints-led approach to drive my practice. Invariance, in this space, is something that is unchanging or something that is constant. With submissions in mind, invariants represent the essential precursors or conditions that need to be met in order to threaten or finish a submission. The reason understanding invariance is so important is that it changes the way we approach grappling. If I focus on searching for invariants rather than trying to copy a 17-step sequence, I'm going to be much more adaptable to my environment and actually achieve the task that I set out to do. The environment, the other person I'm interacting with, is constantly moving and adapting to my movements. So if I know I need to attach to a base joint, a hip in our example today, I could be much more fluid and creative with my movement. This may sound like a crazy statement, but in order to threaten submissions, certain invariants need to be in place. For something to be an invariant, it must always be true. That's why they're so powerful to understand and fight towards. When it comes to limbs, the vast majority of submissions are going to occur when we are either twisting a limb the way it doesn't twist or bending a limb the way it doesn't bend. And then, unless our opponent doesn't tap first. Greg Souders, owner of Standard Jiu-Jitsu in Rockville, Maryland, is where I originally learned about invariants and precursor positions when I had a chance to visit his gym in 2023. He has a great video online discussing the invariants of a heel hook.
The first feature is an isolation process. It's attachment to the base joint. The base, I'm trying to hold my partner still relative to me, and I'm trying to keep that leg separated from everything else. So isolation. The second invariant feature is going to be toe capture. So the reason it's invariant is we can't twist a lever unless we get a hold of it. And then last is lateral hip-knee alignment. To make the leg more twistable, I have to be at the lateral side of it.
Greg clearly lays out our three invariant features of heel hooks: attachment to the hip, keeping them immobilized in relation to the attacking player, and isolation of the attacked leg, toe capture, and lateral hip-knee alignment. With that information in mind, let's take a look at some examples of when heel hooks did and did not work, and let's see if we can explain why using these invariant features of a twisting leg submission. The first example we'll look at is the great Craig Jones hitting a heel hook on Roberto Jimenez. In this clip, you'll see Craig is the bottom player and is constantly looking for leg entanglements. Leg entanglements consist of one player, typically the bottom player, using two of their legs to interact and trap one of their opponent's legs in order to immobilize the hip and isolate a leg, which happens to also be our first invariant of a heel hook. We finally see Craig enter into a leg entanglement, and it significantly reduces Roberto's ability to move. Craig then works on isolating the leg by separating it from Roberto's other leg and hands. He also tries to put him back on his hips too, to continue to inhibit Roberto's mobility. We see Craig align his hips to Roberto's knee and capture his toes at the same time. He then puts Roberto back on his hips so he cannot move and goes for the twisting finish. Notice there is no step 1, 2, or 3 to this. Craig made sure he had the 3 invariants he needed and went for the finish. Next, we have a very quick match between Nicky Ryan and Tony Ramos. I like this clip a lot because it's short, sweet, and to the point. Nicky pulls guard, establishes a leg entanglement, destabilizes Tony to his hips in order to immobilize him, which also allows Nicky to isolate the leg in the process, capture the toes, and get knee-hip alignment, all letting him finish with a twisting leg lock. I like how in this example we see Nicky use his hands to create that lateral alignment first, then go for the toe capture, demonstrating that there's no one right way to go about setting up the invariants. For our next example, let's take a look at some failed heel hook attempts. Garry Tonon is known for his excellent leg lock prowess, and I added an absolute highlight finish he had against Edwin Najmi earlier in this video. However, when he grappled against the terrifying UFC veteran Rousimar Palhares, he was unable to get a finish. Palhares has many heel hook finishes under his belt, and is known for absolutely shredding people's legs when he gets a hold of them. Couple that with the fact that Garry had to be giving up at least 60 pounds in this match. This is legitimately a nightmare situation for Garry, which ultimately led to this being one of the best no-gi matches of all time. There are many times that Garry is able to get 1 or 2 of the invariants in place, and even at certain points all 3, but is unable to get the finish. This is mainly because of Palhares' relentless efforts to keep his hip free by disconnecting Garry's attachments to Palhares' hips. Garry was not able to meaningfully immobilize Palhares throughout the match. The one time he did have a meaningful connection, they rolled out of bounds and had to get reset. As we play through these clips, or as you go back and watch this absolute classic of a match, you will see time and time again Palhares' dedication to disconnecting and or re-attacking Garry's legs. The big difference here, however, is that Palhares would have absolutely ripped Garry's leg off if Garry was not extremely disciplined the entire match and made sure he cleared any of Palhares' connections to his own foot. For our last clip that we'll look at today, here we have Deandre Corbe, one of Greg Sauter's black belts, competing at No-Gi Worlds in December of 2023. I like this example a lot for 2 reasons. 1, it's pretty recent, and 2, this is the first clip where we see the attacker mainly fighting from a top position. Deandre is threatening to pass Moreira's hip line several times throughout this clip. Eventually, Moreira's legs gets overextended and Deandre is able to capture the toes and achieve the rest of our invariants. At second glance, however, you'll notice that Deandre is actually beginning to isolate Moreira's leg with his arms while looking for opportunities to pass his legs, allowing him to achieve the rest of the invariants as he forces Moreira's legs into extension, eventually getting the invariants he needs. This is such a great clip because we get to see Deandre go about the task of isolating a leg, capturing the toes, and getting lateral hip knee alignment in such a different way from the other examples. This hopefully illustrates that there is no quote-unquote right way to go about completing the task. There are infinite possibilities of how you can go about completing the task, and the best part is that the way is new and unique every time. Now, that's great that all these high-level competitors are showing off their heel hook skills, but how can you develop them if you want to start terrorizing, getting leg locks of your own? I have a series of 9 games that you can play to develop the basic skills of getting into leg entanglements, maintaining those connections, and proceeding to the invariants required for a twisting leg submission. I want to be clear, these games are a start to this journey. It's critical to reflect on what's working and what's not, and to develop constraints that support your development. These games can get you started. Also, as you improve, feel free to mix and match the constraints as you go. As long as you're training live, you're already way ahead of the vast majority of players. These games are designed for day 1 players, as well as black belts, so anyone can benefit from these games. The first game is a leg pummeling game for inside position. Both players start seated, with 1 leg in and 1 leg out of the inside position with connections at their shins. Both players' task is to get both of their legs on the inside with connections to the shins of the other player while grabbing both of their feet with their hands. If this happens, great. Stop and reset back to the starting position and play a game. For this game, I would recommend a 6-minute running timer and reset as needed. As you'll see in this second game and moving on throughout the rest of these games, each of these games builds off the previous one. Start with the winning condition of the last game, which is double shin connection with inside control and hands on the feet. From here, the attacking player's job is to get to a leg entanglement with connections to the hip. That is, 2 legs interacting with 1 leg with meaningful connections to the hip. If you get this connection and can hold it for about 3 seconds, you win. Defending player wants to disconnect and stand up in either order, or they can pummel their legs back to the inside and get inside position for themselves. Reset once either of these conditions happen. To note, for this game and all subsequent games, I would recommend either doing 2 3-minute rounds with one player staying on top and the other person staying on bottom for the entire time and only switching between rounds, or do a 6-minute round where you swap positions every time there's a reset. I personally prefer the 6 minutes, but they're both great. The third game is slightly different now. The bottom player will not have a win condition. The bottom player is going to start in any leg entanglement that they wish. From here, the bottom player's job is to keep the top player's hip pinned to the floor for as long as possible. While doing so, look to also keep the top player's feet off the floor as well. You cannot stand up if you cannot put your feet on the floor. Do not feel like that you have to stay locked into your initial alignment. As the top player moves around, you're going to have to adjust accordingly. Also, please feel free to switch up your starting alignment every time you reset. The bottom player cannot win, so just look to maintain the hip connection and the pin for as long as possible. The top player's job is to disconnect whatever connections the bottom player has to their hip and look to stand up to a neutral position. You can do this in either order, meaning you could stand first, then disconnect, or disconnect first, then stand, or do it at the same time, whatever. If this happens, please reset. The fourth game is very similar to the previous game. However, this time we're going to be starting with a standing leg entanglement. The bottom player and top player have the same goals as the last game, but now the bottom player also has to destabilize the top player, which means to put him back on his butt, hips, back, or hands in order to get his hips to the floor and pin them there for as long as possible. The top player goals remain the same, which is to stand and disconnect to a neutral position. Game 5 has a standing player versus a belly up guard player, where the bottom player has inside position behind the top player's knees, and the bottom player also has hands on both of the top player's feet behind the ankles. You can take the hand connection away to have a different starting alignment if you wish. For this game, the bottom player must get back into a leg entanglement and destabilize the top player to the floor. Again, this can be done in any order. You can establish the leg entanglement first, then destabilize, destabilize first, then establish the leg entanglement, or do them both at the same time. If the bottom player destabilizes the top player and gets a leg entanglement, the bottom player then has to keep them there for as long as possible. As an alternative, you can also simply make this a win condition and reset if this happens. The top player's job is to get to any pinning position, chest to chest or chest to back alignment, in front of the line of the hips. This is otherwise known as passing the guard. Just to note, we can develop constraints in games to develop all of the skills we need for jiu-jitsu. However, the focus of this video and these games is for the bottom player. So if I were actually teaching a class, I would still keep the focus on the bottom player. The top player's skills are being worked on at the same time, and in a different class, I may focus on what a top player needs to do to be able to go over, under, around, or through someone's legs in order to get past the line of the hips. For the sixth game, we have a standing player versus a belly-up guard player in a disconnected situation. The tasks and goals of the game remain the same as the previous one, with the only difference being the starting position. If you're very new, starting disconnected can be overwhelming, as the options of what to do are infinite. If you're new and struggling on how to create and maintain connections, you can have the top player start with their hands on the bottom player's shins. Game 7, we're now starting back in any leg entanglement. The win condition for the bottom player is to maintain a leg entanglement and capture the top player's toes. The top player's job is to stand and disconnect. As a safety precaution, if your toes are captured, do not violently spin and try to escape. As we saw with Ryan Hall and BJ Penn, you can hurt yourself if you do this. You can work on this at a later time when you feel more confident, but for right now, as soon as the toes are captured, you're done. The 8th game is the same starting situation as last time. In this game, the bottom player's win condition is to capture the toes and create lateral hip-knee alignment. The top player's goals remain the same as last time. The 9th and final game of what I'm showing you today starts in the same alignment as the previous two, which is any leg entanglement that you'd like. The bottom player's goal is now to establish all 3 invariants, immobilize the hip in relation to your body, and by doing so, isolating the leg, capture the toes, and create lateral hip-knee alignment. From here, twist the leg the way it doesn't go and get the tap. As another safety note, the heel hook is a unique submission in the world of grappling because, as far as I'm aware, it's the only submission that doesn't hurt until damage has occurred. You may feel a tingling or odd sensation in your heel, the arch of your foot, the top of your foot, your Achilles, your shin, your calf, or your knee, or somewhere else in the area that's constrained. This is your sign to tap. Do not wait for pain. The top player's goals remain the same as last time, which is to stand and disconnect your leg from the leg entanglement. I hope this video has shown you that the big bad heel hook isn't so scary after all, and isn't so complicated. Go share this video with your favorite training partner, and then go play some games, develop some skills, twist some legs, and get better at grappling. Before you rush off to the mats, if you liked the video, please drop a like if you would be so kind. Also, don't forget to subscribe to see more content like this. Leave a comment below of the next submission you'd like me to unlock by going over its invariant features. While you're at it, check out my hundreds of other videos where I break down people's jiu-jitsu rounds. Thank you all for watching.